This is the oral portion exam for the skull. This is my list of things that I am supposed to label. So starting off first, we have the nasal bone, which is located right here. Then we have the lacrimal bone, which is located on the inside of the eye there. Next, we have the maxilla, which is located right above the teeth. This is the maxilla bone. Then we have the zygomatic bone, which would be located right here. Next is the temporal bone, which is located on the side here. Then we have the mandible, which is located right here along the jawline. Next we have the parietal bone, which is located on either side of this division behind the frontal bone. The frontal bone is located right here. Then we have the ethmoid bone, which if you take the top of the skull off, it is located down in here. And lastly, we have the occipital bone, which is located along the back here. And that is it for the skull. Now moving on to the upper extremity portion of the oral exam. This bone right here is the clavicle. This bone around the backside is the scapula. This bone right here is the humerus. This bone right here on the interior side is the radius. This bone is the ulna. Now moving on to the metacarpals. See if we can get a good view here. So, starting on the portion that is closest to the thumb on the top row of bones here. See? We have the scaphoid, this little bone right here. Then proximal to that, this bone right here, is the lunate bone. This bone down here is up here rather, is the triquetrium bone. Now moving down below the triquetrium, this bone above the pinky finger is the pisiform bone. And then moving next to that, we have the hamate bone, the little small one right here. Next to that, we have the capitate bone. Proximal to that, we have the trapezoid bone. And then the furthest one, the one closest to the thumb, is the trapezium bone. Now moving on to the rib cage. We have numbers 1 through 12 as far as ribs go. This, starting from the top here, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Ribs 1 through 7 are considered true ribs. Then you have ribs 8, 9, 10, and then on the inside here, the top one is 11, the bottom one is 12. Ribs 8 through 12 are considered false ribs, and more specifically, ribs 11 and 12 are considered floating ribs. Now moving on to the final portion of the oral exam, the lower extremities. So if you can see in here on the inner edge, this bone right here goes about halfway of the circle. This is the pubis bone. The bone that is on the outside, the other half of the ring here, would be considered your ischium bone. And this bone right back here is considered the ilium bone. Moving on, you have this is your femur, and then putting the leg up here. Your patella is this bone right here on your knee. Next we have the tibia and the fibula. Now moving on to the foot portion. Try and get a good view of the foot here. Tough to see. So, starting this bone top here, try and point with the paper clip. Right there is the talus. Then around the back side, sort of over right here, this would be the calcaneus. Then moving on, this bone right here is the navicular. This bone over here on the far side, the larger bone here, is considered the cuboid bone. And then moving from the cuboid bone, we have the lateral cuneiform, and then we have the intermediate or middle cuneiform, and then we have the medial cuneiform, most distal from the cuboid bone. And that is the end of the oral portion of this exam. Thank you very much.